The laughter echoed across the parking lot long after the words were spoken. A group of customers standing outside a luxury shopping center pointed at the grease-covered mechanic kneeling beside an old pickup truck. One of them smirked and shook his head as if the man was some kind of joke. The mechanic heard every word, but he kept working silently. Years of hardship had taught him that some battles weren't worth fighting. What none of those people knew was that before sunset, that same mocked single father would make a choice that would change his life forever. Before we begin, if you believe kindness still matters and that good people deserve second chances, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Enlightened Story. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories to people who need them. The mechanic's name was Jack Donovan. At 38 years old, life had worn him down far beyond his age. His hands were rough from years of repairing engines. His work boots were cracked, and his small garage on the edge of town barely earned enough to keep the lights on. 5 years earlier, his wife had passed away after a sudden illness, leaving him alone to raise his young son, Caleb. Since then, every day had been a struggle between paying bills, keeping food on the table, and being both mother and father to the boy who meant everything to him. That morning had already been difficult. 2 customers had canceled repairs. The landlord was demanding overdue rent for the garage, and the bank had sent another warning notice about his truck loan. By noon, Jack felt like the entire world was pushing him toward the edge. Still, he kept going because giving up wasn't an option. Late that afternoon, he finished a roadside repair call near an upscale shopping district. As he loaded his tools into his truck, he noticed someone sitting on the curb across the street, a teenage boy. He looked no older than 16. His face was buried in his hands. Even from a distance, Jack could tell he was crying. Beside him sat a luxury SUV with a completely flat tire. Dozens of people walked past. Nobody stopped. Nobody asked if he was okay. Jack hesitated. He had another job waiting. He desperately needed the money. But something about the boy's tears reminded him of Caleb, so he crossed the street. As he approached, several nearby shoppers exchanged amused looks. One man laughed and muttered that the mechanic probably saw an easy payday. Another joked that the rich kid could simply buy another tire. The comments stung, but Jack ignored them. The boy looked frightened and overwhelmed. His phone battery had died. He had no idea how to change a tire, and he was stranded nearly an hour from home. Without asking for payment, Jack opened his toolbox and got to work. The summer sun beat down relentlessly. Sweat rolled down his face. His shirt became soaked with grease and dust, but within 20 minutes, the spare tire was mounted securely. The teenager finally smiled through his tears. It was a small smile, but it carried enormous relief. When he asked how much he owed him, Jack simply shook his head. He told him to save his money and drive carefully. Kindness costs nothing. The boy looked stunned. Most people he met expected something in return. This stranger expected nothing. As he drove away, Jack returned to his truck and continued his day, never imagining he would hear from him again. That night after dinner, he sat at the kitchen table helping Caleb with homework while quietly wondering how he would pay next month's rent. Sleep came slowly. Worry had become his nightly companion. Then the next morning arrived and everything changed. At exactly 9:12 a.m., Jack's phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. He nearly ignored it, but something told him to answer. The woman on the other end spoke calmly and professionally. She introduced herself as Catherine Voss. At first, the name meant nothing. Then she explained the crying teenager from yesterday was her son. Jack remembered instantly. Catherine thanked him for helping when no one else would. Her son had told her every detail. The tears, the strangers walking by, the mechanic who stopped despite having troubles of his own. Jack felt embarrassed by the praise. He had simply done what any decent person should do. Then Catherine said something unexpected. She wanted to meet him that afternoon at her office. Curious but cautious, Jack agreed. A few hours later, he arrived at one of the tallest buildings downtown. Only then did he realize who Catherine Voss really was. She wasn't just wealthy. She was one of the region's most successful business leaders, owner of a transportation company worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The receptionist escorted him to a corner office overlooking the city skyline. Catherine greeted him warmly. There was no arrogance, no superiority, only genuine gratitude. As they talked, she learned about his garage, his son, and the struggles he faced since becoming a widower. She listened carefully, not as a billionaire speaking to a mechanic, but as a mother speaking to another parent. Then she revealed something remarkable. Months earlier, her company had launched a community initiative focused on supporting small local businesses. They had been searching for an independent mechanic to manage maintenance contracts for a growing fleet of service vehicles. Several large repair chains had submitted proposals. But after hearing her son's story, Catherine wanted to meet the man behind the act of of kindness. Because skill could be hired, character could not. Jack sat speechless. The contract she placed on the desk was worth more than he typically earned in 2 years. Enough to save his garage, enough to eliminate his debts, enough to secure Caleb's future. For a moment he couldn't speak. The weight of years seemed to lift from his shoulders. Not because he had become rich, but because hope had finally returned. Over the next year, everything changed. His garage expanded. He hired additional mechanics. Customers returned. The business flourished. Most importantly, he was able to spend more time with Caleb instead of constantly worrying about survival. Yet, despite the success, Jack never forgot the lesson that transformed his life. The opportunity hadn't come from chasing money. It had come from choosing kindness when it was inconvenient, from helping someone when nobody was watching, from stopping for a crying teenager when everyone else walked away. Years later, a framed photograph hung inside the garage. It showed Jack, Caleb, Catherine, and her son standing together at the grand opening of the expanded shop. Whenever customers asked about the picture, Jack would smile. Then he would tell them that the most valuable thing in life isn't wealth. It's the simple decision to help another person when they need it most. And sometimes the smallest act of kindness can create a future greater than anything you ever imagined. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and share it with someone who still believes in the power of kindness. Special request, comment below with the words, "Kindness changes lives." If you believe one good deed can transform someone's future, share this, because somewhere today a struggling person may be one act of kindness away from a completely different life. And sometimes the people the world laughs at become the very people who inspire it the most. Thank you for being part of the journey.